For decades, the name Jeffrey Epstein, well, it meant untouchable power, disturbing secrets. It was a story pretty much confined to sealed court documents and quiet rumors. But a single act of Congress was about to force all of those secrets into the light. So let's dig into what happened when that vault was finally cracked open. This was a moment that was years in the making. After all this public and political pressure reached a boiling point, the clock was finally set on one of the most disturbing chapters in modern American history. The countdown to transparency had officially begun. Now, this is something you don't see every day. Congress, in a rare show of unity, actually passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And the goal was super simple, super direct. Force the Department of Justice to unlock decades of sealed investigative files on Jeffrey Epstein and his powerful network. The era of secrecy, it seemed, was finally coming to an end. What happened next was just a digital avalanche. We're talking about almost 3.5 million pages of documents just dropped for the public to see. Flight logs, interview transcripts, grand jury materials, photos, videos, you name it. For the very first time, we all got a raw, unfiltered look into a world that had been so carefully hidden.
So the big promise here, right, was that this massive document dump would finally replace all the speculation with cold, hard facts. But really, the question on everyone's mind was simple. What would these millions of pages actually prove? After all the rumors, all the whispers, what would we finally, actually know?
Okay, so to really make sense of all these files, you have to understand the guy at the center of this whole web. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just a criminal. He was an obsessive collector, but his collection wasn't art or rare cars. It was people. And this quote, man, it just cuts right to the heart of what drove him. From what people who knew him said, his real currency wasn't money. It was being close to power. He absolutely craved influence, and he built this whole social world designed specifically to draw in the world's most powerful people. And how did he pay for all this? Well, with a fortune that was just as mysterious as his friends. I mean, the guy was worth almost $600 million when he died. But here's the kicker. He had zero official credentials as a financial advisor. As you can see here, most of his money came from these massive fees from just 2 billionaire clients and his knack for connecting people for giants like JP Chase.
And the network he built, it's just staggering. The files confirm connections. We're talking flight logs, emails, photos, to former presidents like Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, royalty like Prince Andrew, and tech titans like Bill Gates and Elon Musk. Now, it is absolutely crucial to point out what the caption says here. Just because someone is in these documents, it does not mean they did anything wrong. But it does create a factual record of who was in his orbit that's just impossible to ignore. But years before all these famous names got dragged into it, Epstein's crimes actually first came to light down in Florida. And how the justice system handled it back then, well, that became one of the most controversial parts of this entire mess.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It's pretty damning. The investigation starts in 2005. By 2007, federal prosecutors literally have a 32-count indictment for sex trafficking ready to go. But then in 2008, this infamous non-prosecution agreement gets approved by U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta. Epstein dodges the big federal charges, pleads to lesser state charges, and serves just 13 months. A lot of it on work release. It was a deal that kept him protected for over a decade.
And for years, it really seemed like that was it. That sweetheart deal was the end of the story. But thankfully, you had these relentless journalists and the incredible bravery of his survivors who just refused to let this thing die.
So what happened? Well, in 2018, the Miami Herald just blew the lid back off the whole thing with their reporting, which created this huge public outrage, and that led directly to new federal charges in New York in 2019. Epstein was arrested, but he never made it to trial. He died by suicide in his jail cell about a month later. And that's when the focus of justice really shifted to his chief accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was convicted in 2021 for her central role in the whole operation.
Which, of course, brings us all the way back to these files. With Epstein dead and Maxwell in prison, these documents were supposed to be the final, definitive answer. So the big question is, what did they actually prove? And maybe even more importantly, what did they leave out?
Okay, so the files draw a really clear line on a few things. First, what's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt is that Jeffrey Epstein himself sexually abused underage girls. The evidence for his own crimes is just overwhelming. But here's where it gets murky. The idea that he was running this huge trafficking ring for other powerful men? A Justice Department memo actually said the FBI found scant evidence of that.
And you see a pretty similar split when it comes to the whole blackmail theory. What we know for a fact is that Ghislaine Maxwell was his co-conspirator. She was convicted for it. But that popular idea that Epstein was secretly recording his powerful buddies to blackmail them, well, according to another DOJ memo, they found no credible evidence for it. Officially, the smoking gun tapes just haven't been found.
You know, for years, a huge part of this mystery was all these John Does, nearly 200 people whose identities were hidden in court documents. You can see right here in this actual filing how it worked. It was part of this system to protect people's privacy during legal cases. And unsealing these names, well, that was a huge focus of the whole document release.
But here's the thing, instead of giving everyone total clarity, the release of these files kind of just opened up a whole new can of worms. It left a lot of victims and advocates feeling like the full story still hasn't been told. And a huge point of conflict comes down to just the numbers. I mean, take a look at this chart. The DOJ says they collected over 6 million pages of stuff, but they only released about 3.5 million. The official reason was that the rest were just duplicates or weren't relevant. But for a lot of critics, that gap, millions of missing pages, that's a massive hole in the story.
And this quote from attorney Ann Oliverius, it just sums up the frustration perfectly. See, the focus for a lot of people has shifted. It's not just about what Epstein did anymore. It's about how on earth he got away with it for decades. The files show us the crimes, but they don't show us who might have been protecting him.
And then there's the whole mess with the redactions, which got a ton of criticism. This question from another lawyer really hits the nail on the head. Despite the whole point being transparency, a lot of people felt the documents were released sloppily. Some victims' information got out, while some powerful names stayed blacked out, and it just fueled this feeling that the system was still somehow protecting the powerful.
So, at the end of the day, the Epstein files are one of the biggest document dumps in modern history. Yeah, they confirmed how depraved this guy was and the insane reach of his network. But they also left us with this really unsettling question. If this is what they let us see, what, if anything, is still locked away in the shadows?